The Fossores Chapter House is the world's first headquarters for Christian ministerial innovation, bringing preachers, leaders, and innovators together to collaborate on new liturgies, resources, and responses to the challenge of our times. This podcast explores the ever-changing era of perpetual upheaval, in which effective ministry requires constant imagination, creativity, and change. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Chapter House podcast. I'm here with my great friend, Jake McGarry, who's, of course, been on the podcast before, and our new friend, Dan. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody what you do for a living and for Jesus and for whatever.
Yeah, I just do art full-time now, and I'm at the phase of my process where I'm still figuring out what that means. So I can usually answer the first question, what do you do? I do art. People are like, really? What does that look like? I'm like, that's a great question. But most of what I do for work is commercial murals. I really liked street art when I was younger and started messing around with just rattle can painting, and that kind of turned into jobs, like work. And so that's kind of the money maker, and then it helps give me time to be able to explore everything else I want to do.
Did you see downtown Jackson? We have a pseudo-famous rattle can artist. That's a phrase I hadn't heard before, which is so great. But this little kid, I don't know if he's a kid, but he graffitis something that looks kind of like a halfway between a Pokemon ball and one of the guys from Despicable Me. What are those called? The Minions.
Nice.
But there's this little tag, you see it all over the place, and we see it in Detroit, we see it in Chicago sometimes. And,
right.
Yeah, which is fun. But I would have showed it to you if I would have known that.
Yeah, man. I think it's interesting, the connections with like vandalism, graffiti, and like guerrilla marketing.
Yeah.
The idea of like development of a brand and then just trying to plaster it everywhere you want people to associate it, and there's a lot of that.
I always liked the graffiti that's like power washer, where they find a dirty building and they wash,
right.
They clean up one part of it to look in their logo. Like, oh, that's so cool.
Because if the city wants to cover it up, they have to come wash that wall.
Exactly.
It's like, I've seen several like in tunnels and like, they get so gross, and it's like, it forces the city to come clean the tunnels.
Yeah. Well, there's something really gospel-y about it, too. It's like the world is so gross except for the mark that I made, which is now striking and beautiful. And then there's something gospel-y about it also. And now I will coerce the powers that be to come and do their job.
Right. Yeah, dude, there's a lot. The first time I saw that, I thought, this is a really special thing. Yeah.
Well, it's also like the slightly more grown-up version of somebody writing "Wash Me" on the back of a dirty minivan.
Right.
We had a graffiti artist that used to work at Westwinds, and I remember one day getting him in trouble because I walked down into the lobby with my co-pastor at the time, and there was the new logo that he'd just designed for us tagged on the wall on a brick. So we were like, "Hey man, who did this?" He's like, "I don't know."
I don't know.
You're the only one who knows what the logo is, so we think it's probably you. No. Oh, okay, well, why don't you just get some cleaning stuff and take care of it?
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think 44-year-old me would have probably just let him keep it, but whatever I was.
Right.
30-year-old me was like, how dare you defile the house of the Lord,
right.
you miscreant, Oh, man. So you were doing graffiti art for a bit, and then...
let me clarify. A lot of the graffiti art guys are like awesome, hardcore, really cool, really like into that culture, and I was never that cool. I was more just like knew people that did it, interested in it, but definitely I feel inspired by it. And so I don't know that I ever like earned any, but dude, the idea of like taking an old building that nobody wants to look at and just throwing something up there, and then all of a sudden it's like whether people like it or don't like it, it's like a point of interest. You know what I mean? It's like nobody cared about this building, and now people care about it. Like, and I think that really like was like a beginning spark for me of like, painting is such a weird thing because it's like you're just wiping stuff on stuff. It's like, or spraying it, but it's like that it can have such an impact. Yeah, that's what like started in me to see like the impact that art can have, and at least drawing people's attention to something that they never looked at before. You know?
Right. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, my mind's going in a bunch of different directions. I kind of want to stay with street art just for a second, because we were talking the other day about Banksy and about Shepard Fairey and how different it is. The evolutions of their two, I don't want to say brands, but style. Banksy is still iconic, almost like clip art, clever clip art with a sort of poignant and bitterly prophetic edge. But then Shepard Fairey went from crappy Andre the Giant posters to these really elaborate stencils that are quite beautiful in a sort of anime style. So two really different journeys from, I think, probably the two most dominant or well-known graffiti artists.
Right.
Would you put yourself on that spectrum? I mean, do you feel like you've become more complex, or do you feel like you've settled into your style and stayed there?
Dude, I think both of those guys are really great. I don't know what the right words are, but I feel like I think of words like design, concepts, like really great concepts. And I feel like in the world of art, there's always like, how good is your idea, And then there's like, how well did you execute it? There's like all these different kind of checkpoints where you can either succeed or fail, and different artists have strengths and weaknesses. And I feel like both of those guys, through stencils and through, the wallpaper stuff, it's like they found a medium that was simple, if I'm doing a stencil, or if I'm doing, it's like, I'm not getting in there with brush strokes, and doing, or even a rattle can. I'm not like doing highlights, and it's like a fairly simple process, because they're both like, in my perspective, and I'm not an expert, but really brilliant from like a concept standpoint and like a design. Shepard Fairey, I feel like design really well, and Banksy just like concept, like visual communicating through a picture. Yeah, it's just like super. He's like super socially aware, like great at social commentary.
They're like little parables.
Right. So what's cool is like their medium they made really simple. Yeah. So you like simplify the way that you communicate to like amplify what you're trying to say. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of other artists will like, it's like, I want to make art, but I don't really have anything to say. And so I'll like paint a lion, but it'll just be this awesome lion painting. You know what I mean? Like,
great lion.
Right. And it's not going to be just like a stencil of a lion. It's going to be like an awesome lion. But yeah, I don't know what that means. And so it's like, I feel like I bounce back and forth between that. I like know a lot of artists, even in Denton, that are like, man, they're just always getting these killer concepts. Yeah. And if I have something to say, art is a great way to say it. Yeah. But I feel like for me personally, I want to create way more often than I feel like I have something to say that somebody should listen to. Yeah, right. And so I don't like to restrict myself to like that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm just going to make. Like, I have this idea for something to make, and I'm just going to make it. I'm going to try to enjoy making it, and hopefully someone else will try to enjoy looking at it enough to buy it. But yeah. It's like just the process of making is fun to me. And so, and dude, maybe those guys are similar, but
yeah, maybe they have all kinds of stuff that doesn't quite ring true. I mean, Banksy's got a huge catalog of rat paintings that he's done that are, so I guess sort of in broad strokes, a commentary on society, but the individual rat pictures aren't really all that cool, except for the 3 or 4 that when you Google, you're like, oh, rat as paparazzi, oh, rat as policeman, oh, rat as queen, but
right. Even the way he spreads his art, like sneaking into a gallery, and putting his piece in. That, I mean, that's an art piece. Like how he's presenting the art is like, it's like a performance piece kind of. It's like, documentaries, like.
He made his own documentary. What it was like late '90s, wasn't it? Have you ever seen that?
Well, there's a couple.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch. I don't know that I've like watched through the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, dude. I think he's like. What I love about that man is like, with these guys, you feel like they found a way of expressing art that's like true to themselves. Yeah. So things that are true about themselves that other people do, they'll also do those things. They're not the only guys using stencils and using like wallpaper stuff, but they'll kind of like shed the things that aren't them and amplify the things that are them. Yeah. And I think that's what's like really. But also, man, those guys took a risk at not being successful. Like, there's probably hundreds, thousands maybe, of contemporary graffiti artists of their day that did not end up as successful as those two, that we're not talking about now, that probably were like just as true to their craft. So it's like weird. I feel like when you deviate from what other people are doing and try to figure out what you want to do, you have to like take the risk of like it might be accepted or rejected.
Well, I don't know that either one of those guys were chasing success, or certainly not. I mean, it seems like Banksy's still doing the same stunt that he was doing 20, 30 years ago, because that's him. Seems like Shepherd really has grown up, matured, recognized there's a commercial aspect to it.
Yeah, there's a brand here.
Yeah, he's gone beyond, he's gone beyond T-shirts, and now he's making, Obama posters and women's advocacy murals, and but I think he's really comfortable in a suit coat now. He enjoys a champagne flute as much as the next guy, where Banksy's still probably running around in a hoodie and
Well, dude, and that's a fairly recent thing with street art, like pre-90s, maybe early 2000s. Nobody was doing street art because it was like a lucrative career choice. Yeah, right. You're like, but then these guys. There's been kind of these waves of guys. Those, as far as I know, were like the first guys that like, oh my gosh, they've turned this into a successful job. And then there was like, I feel like kind of a second wave, and it feels like now there's like we're like waiting on a third wave, but now there's so many people that are getting into street art as, oh, this could be a job, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's funny. It's like weird, man. It's a weird thing. I've like processed a lot because I grew up watching all these videos of these guys and feeling so inspired, being like, that's what I'm going to be, Yeah. But then it's like the world changes by the time you grow up. It's not the same world that they were in. And so you can't do what they did and it work out. And so now I feel like the mural festivals thing is an interesting thing because it creates an avenue for this, like, for how many artists there are. But now there's like, it feels like there's like 100 more artists that are looking to make a living off of street art. 100 times more than there was when those guys started out.
Yeah, sure. What is maybe this is a stupid question, but in general, what's a mural worth? Like, we got all these murals downtown. I mean, would they fly somebody in? Somebody lives here for a week or two. I mean, are they making 10 grand? Are they making 100 grand? Are they making?
That's a great question.
$3,000? You don't know.
Yeah, dude. I mean, art. It's always weird to figure out. One of the things I love about art, it's like, we talked about this. Like, it's important, but it's also kind of silly.
Yeah.
And it's valuable, but it's hard to put a monetary value on it,
right, unless it's all about what people are going to pay for it. Yeah.
Right. Unless you kind of stock market, like this industry has decided it's worth that, and so we're going to invest in, the whole like art investment thing. So it's like, dude, it's literally, so the world I function in right now is way more like blue collar. It's like commercial, and so you can price things according to complexity of design, square footage, like this and that.
So you don't charge for time, you charge for like, all right, this wall will cost you X if you want something elaborate. This wall will cost you Y if it's something simple. Okay.
And a lot of what I do, just me personally, is like, it's way more like service industry. Like, you have a vision for something, and I've developed some skill sets, and I'm going to provide a service to help bring your vision to life. And in my experience, people have varying degrees of a complete vision. They've got blanks. I don't know, dude. I know there needs to be like a koi fish. I just know there's got to be, you know what I mean? Like a koi fish and a bottle rocket. I just see it, and you're like, okay. And so then I'm trying to fill in the blanks around the koi fish. But for me, dude, as far as like what I'm gonna do to pay my bills for now, I love that space of just like you have a meeting with the electrician, and then you have a meeting with the plumber. And then you have a meeting with the mural guy. Like, it's like I'm waiting in line next to the electrician and the plumber, and so it's
that's fun.
That's great. So you can definitely put like industry prices on that. When you talk about like fine art, like street art being an extension of gallery art, dude, it's like up for grabs because it has to do with like how well known has that artist made themselves,
sure.
Like the complexity of the design, but it just goes beyond like what it's going to cost the artist into like who the artist is and what having their art is going to do for the city and like.
Well, it's the same in music. You can have a cellist come and play for your wine and cheese party, and if it's a college student, they might play the piece perfectly, but you're going to get them for $20 an hour.
Right.
Whereas if it's somebody from the New York Philharmonic, that's going to cost you a lot more. It might not sound all that different to somebody with a background in percussion,
but some people can tell the difference, and they want to get the hiring guy. And that's kind of how it is, because you're always like you're growing in your craft as you're working, and so towards the later end, it's like people are paying for the millions of hours you've spent working on your craft and not getting paid for it. You know what I mean?
There's that famous story about Picasso, right, making a doodle on a napkin. The lady next to him asking him if she can have the napkin. He says, sure, it's $5,000. And she's like, but it took you, 30 seconds or something.
Right.
And he goes, no, it took me 80 years.
Right, dude. That's the weird thing is like when people are like, well, how long is it going to take? How much do you make an hour? Or this and that. And it's like, dude, I'm only like 13 or 14 years into doing this, but it's like, dude, countless hours. I'll put myself on like homework regiments and countless hours and like trying to be disciplined where you're not getting paid. So,
well, and there's a thing too, but once you become, established in your career, whatever that means, but once you're not starving, then there's a big question of, do I want to do that? Like,
right.
If somebody comes to me and they say, hey, can you do my wedding? Like immediately I'm like, no, I don't know you. I don't want to give up a Saturday. I don't want to do premarital counseling. And they're like, oh, well, I'll pay. And I go, but no matter what amount of money you pay me, it's not going to make me want to do this. You know, until the potential client, or I don't know what you even call wedding people, until you go like, oh, I suddenly care about you. Oh, you're my friend's friend. Oh, you go to my church. Oh, you're my wife's cousin. Okay, well now, okay, thank you for paying me. That helps, but but up until that point where you care about the person, the idea that they're going to take your time for a little bit of money, it's going to have to be pretty great little bit of money, or it's going to have to be in Bora Bora or something before you really want to do it.
Yeah, so I feel like there's all these ideals on your journey as like a working artist. Yeah. Of like, oh, okay, I've got to climb away from this 9-to-5 job just so I have time to work on art. Because it's like I can't keep. I'm not gonna. This isn't gonna be sustainable if I'm having. And not for everybody, but for some people. Right. And so it's like, first there's just the part of like, can I make a living out of it? Like, can I pay my bills? And for me, man, the reason to try to do art as a job is just so I can set my schedule and I can make time to create art that probably won't make any money, but I'm like stoked about creating it. Yeah. And so it's like, if I can organize where I'm doing the art that makes money, and then I'm doing my homework, I'm doing my development, and then I have time left over to just explore the world of art. Yeah, right. That's the payoff for me. And so it's like, but then, if you get to a place where like you can actually make a living off of the exploration, yeah, right. Like that's what you were working towards. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna drop these like, the bill paying jobs, you know what I mean? And it's like not out of like spite or whatever, but it's just like this, I've reached like a truer level of why I set out to do this. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, my career is kind of growing closer and closer to like the ambition that got me started on this thing.
And you hope that it pays off. Well, that's the, you've heard of course about all the craziness with NFTs and digital art, right? Non-fungible tokens. And
dude, that's wild.
Yeah. And the bidding on Beeple Craps art, like that got insane. So I'll screw up some of the details of the story, but for anybody who's unfamiliar that might be watching or listening, Beeple Crap is a digital artist, and for 10, 12 years, every single day he would post a digital picture. And they're really quite elaborate. Like they're digital paintings, not just an icon or something. Mm-hmm. And they're weird things like here's Super Mario, eating the head of Princess Peach, or here's a spaceship that's landing on the Temple Mount in Israel, and everybody who comes out of the spaceship is a midget, or just you're like, this is weird and slightly disturbed, but also it's just today's picture or today's painting, right? And he just did them for days and days and days and years and years and years, and some he would sell and some not so much. Well, when non-fungible tokens came out, that's a way for you to have potentially sole ownership, or at least privatized ownership of digital art. So you sort of pay for the rights to own, potentially exclusively, a JPEG or a high-res image file. So he combined or compiled all 20,000 of his digital paintings into one file, right? And then that went for a bid up an NFT, and it got $60-70 million. So here's a guy who was selling things for I don't know, a couple $100 every now and then, now is a millionaire, right? Because of a new art form, and the thing he did just as a hobby and as a passion for forever and ever and ever has now validated him or ratified him, and he's still making daily paintings, which I think is super cool, because that's what he always wanted to do. Yeah, dude, it's awesome. I feel like that with artists too, there's like the people that appreciate the past,
and want to just want to like bring the past into the present, you know? Because things from the past deteriorate. They're falling away. They're like less and less accessible. So they're like, I'm going to make things that are like tributes to the past. You know what I mean? And like, and then there's like the artists that are like, I'm going to help drive into the future, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, those guys, I feel like are like, it's so imperative that you are understanding like all trends and all movements and all, because that's like your medium and determines how successful you. It's not just paintbrushes. It's not just paintbrushes and paint. It's like technology advancement, like social media movements, like, you know, cultural movements.
Well, and you can't even really chase all that stuff or anticipate all that stuff. I mean, it's in the same way that you don't want to try and reclaim the past. I don't think you want to try and guess the future. Everybody I know in ministry or art that's trying to guess the future ends up doing something kind of screwy based on an article they read in Fast Company 4 years ago. And it just feels a little weird, a little try hard. And so I think it's better if you go deeper in the inside and keep asking, like, what am I passionate about? What am I interested in? You know, where do I feel like God's leading me? What does the future look like? What haven't I tried before? What do I enjoy when I try? And keep deepening the interiority of it. Because, you know, if you start today trying to learn how to be a social media guru in order to promote your art, even create art through social media, and what you're trying to do is be an influencer, by the time you're an influencer, you're useless, you're bland. I mean, maybe you get, you know, 1 million followers on Instagram like every other girl in a bikini. So are you an artist now? Or are you just somebody who figured out which buttons to click and which hashtags to use? And in the process of chasing all that, you haven't really cultivated or developed your art. So now you don't have anything to say other than bikinis, which, I mean, hey, yeah, Yahoo, but still, that's hardly the pursuit of an artist.
Well, dude, and I think I can admire anybody that's on a journey to sincerity. Like,
that's a great phrase. Yeah.
Because sincerity is going to look different for each of us. Like, I think some people are just, I don't know what it is. You can call it, I don't know, genetics or whatever. Yeah. Some people are good at predicting the future. and some people are really bad at it. And I'll tell you one thing I know about myself. I'm really bad at predicting the future. And when I figured that out, I stopped trying to predict the future. And it's like, and I stopped trying to put myself in situations where my art or my job was dependent on my ability to predict the future, because it's like, dude, that's not my wheelhouse. I'm going to like stay in my lane. I'm not good at that. And so I feel like art for me has been it's like a journey of self-discovery too, where you've got like things that come natural to you that are good. Like somebody can explain it one time and boom, it makes sense to you and you can do it. You can watch it one time and then you can do it. Like these things that seem to come natural to you that are like harder for other people, on top of things that just interest and fascinate you. Like every time I see somebody doing this, I don't know why I'm fascinated by it. It's awesome, you know, like, or like some sort of purpose. You have some sort of purpose in life. Like I feel like my life's going to be short. I hope by the end of my life, this happens to somebody through me, you know, like, and I feel like you're like constantly trying to find the convergence of those things. Like, where do these things that I seem to be good at, and these things that I seem to be interested in, and these things that I seem to think are important, where do they converge? And maybe, and like, that's where I feel like there's like the most fulfillment when you can find where those things converge. It feels, it feels like a truer sense of yourself. And it's weird, man, because, you know, throughout a ton of human history, like people just, your dad was a brick mason, and then you were a brick mason, and you paid your bills, and you fed your kids, and you loved people around you, and you died. And it's like not an ideal in my mind, but it's like, but humans still existed and loved people and hopefully felt some sort of fulfillment. So it's a slippery thing, man, because I feel like our culture now puts so much emphasis on what you do,
on personal fulfillment and satisfaction.
Well, just that your fulfillment is so tied to like what you do, or who you are, like how people see you, or what titles before or after your name. And I don't know that it's any more unhealthy than any other culture in history, but I do think it's like good to be aware of that and careful of that. Like if I don't want this to happen, but if something tragic happens to me where I can't do the art that I'm doing now, I'll still be just as much what I am for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? And like trying to keep sobriety on that, but also to understand there's like a lot of joy in figuring out the pieces that make you up and where they fit, you know?
Well, for any artist, whether it's a writer, filmmaker, musician, you know, I mean, there's that sense of validation that comes when a lot of people like your work and will pay for it. And then every artist that I know struggles with the fact that they haven't quite made it, you know, like, oh man, I sure hope this is viral. I sure hope this is profitable. I sure hope this is a bestseller. I sure hope this one changes the conversation. I sure hope this one, it gets me invitations. And you realize like that kind of panicky need to reach a certain level of influence robs you of the joy of the process and distracts you from enjoying who you are as a human.
Right.
Because you're like, are you like, you know, if you meet somebody and they're a writer and they never sell more than 1,000 copies of a poem or a short story or whatever,
right?
Like, do you care? No, you're just like, this is my friend. I love you. I want to go out for dinner and I want to enjoy you. And if in the back of their mind they're going, man, my life would be so much better if I sold more copies of my haikus. You're like, how much poorer are you as a person when you can't enjoy dinner the same way? Because, I mean, you have no idea how many books I've sold. We have no idea how many films Jake's made. We have no idea how many paintings or whatever you've done. And that never has come into our friendship or conversation.
Right.
And yet our own interiority goes, oh shoot, I got to be better. I should, you know, and you got to learn how to quiet that voice, how to renew your mind out of that, or else you're screwed.
Well, and the need to size people up, it comes out of an insecurity. Like, I feel like even the awkwardness of high school, you walk in and you're like, okay, I'm definitely cooler than that guy. I'm not as cool as that guy, you know, or the gym, like, dude, I'm cooler than that guy. I'm not as cool as that. It's like, there's something in our brains that when you walk in a room, immediately you're trying to figure out where you fit in the hierarchy. And it's like, I'm sure that's tied to some sort of survival instinct or something. I don't know. But it's like, the need to figure out how cool someone else is so you can figure out how cool you are in relation to them is like so unhealthy and such a waste of time for like genuine human connection. And but it's like hard to be mature enough to climb out of that. So sometimes I think it's fun when you go into environments where you're like, I have no idea what you've accomplished. You have no idea what I've accomplished. Sure. We're going to try to keep that irrelevant and get to know each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, sometimes that's really refreshing for me. One, because I haven't accomplished that much, so I don't think they're gonna like me that much better.
I don't want to play the game.
I think my odds are better if you don't look at my accomplishments. But two, it's just like it helps to reinforce me. It helps me to climb out of measuring myself by those standards.
Yeah. Now you're not just a painter, right? You're a mixed media artist. You're a sculptor, right? You're a wood carver.
Dude, I want to do everything. I feel like I've always done art on the side and had to have like kind of a day job. And in the past few years, I really tried to get day jobs that would contribute to the art that I do. And I had a ton of debt from student loans. I went and got a degree for something that that was really expensive and I didn't go do.
What was your degree in?
Aviation.
Really?
Yeah. So my degree was like, I got aircraft mechanic certification and a commercial multi-engine level pilot's license. But I don't want to talk about that too long. But, all that really means is like, I got a ton of debt. So what's weird about when I decided to do art, I'm like, I know I can't go back to school. I'm going to have to figure this out on my own. So
Did you finish your degree?
Yeah. So I'm going to have to be disciplined, but then also I'm not just trying to figure out how to live. I'm trying to figure out how to live and pay off this like house payment that I locked myself into without a house. And so I feel like I had to like hustle a little bit longer to feel comfortable. So we only recently, like last year, went full time into art. Yeah. So it's really exciting time for me right now because it feels like the beginning of getting to explore all this stuff I want to explore. I'm getting like a welder this year and like there's so much stuff.
We have some foibles with welder. You know, we unsuccessfully welded a few things and just mostly burned holes in our shoes and said bad words that made Jesus blush. You know?
Right, dude. But it's so fun, man. It's like the fun is just getting to play with stuff, getting to create, getting to make, getting to like, you know.
Well, that's you. That's totally you, Jake. You're a tinkerer and a player. Every time I show up, Jake's moving something around and I curse at him under my breath because I don't know what he did.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I don't like leaving things like they are. I'm not a good optimizer. I'm a good playing around. Were you still doing art when you were in school?
In college?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like an outlet for me to, it's kind of an intense degree program, and so it was like an outlet for me. So I would, at that point especially, I wasn't interested in vandalism.
Yeah.
I was just interested in painting with rattle cans mostly. But it's hard to paint with rattle cans, especially cheap rattle cans, on a small surface. And so I built this like giant PVC frame, and would like stretch bed sheets were like the cheapest material I could find. Yeah. And just go out and like paint something on it, because then you can like fold it up. If you like it, you can keep it, or you can throw it away. It was like $4, and so I would just do it for fun. And around that time, I think I got a Facebook. Facebook was like a thing. That's going to make me sound older, but people would see it and they'd be like, hey, could you paint my kid's room? Could you paint my... And it was really just people contacting me, and I was like, sure, yeah, we need money. I need like... I was like working at Starbucks, going to school, and then like painting for fun. And so it like turned into a job, and it like grew into a job.
Do you think that the pressure of having like finishing school and then realizing that you had to pay off this debt, or at least keep the payments going, do you feel like that do you feel like you were able to turn that into like fuel to like stay prolific, to stay hustling, or did that feel primarily like a distraction?
Yeah, no, dude, I think it was good for me because it forced me, I feel like in a lot of ways, I don't want to say that. I think like it forced me to realize like if I'm going to do this, I got to go for it, and I got to go for it in a way that's sustainable, because it's not going to happen fast. Like we just went full time in art 14 years into it, and so it's like, sometimes people are like hustle until you're just burned out at the end of every day, and I knew like that's not going to work for me, because I'm not going to be discovered in a couple of years. It's going to be like a 20-year process for me to get to sustainable. And so it had to be sustainable, and it had to be like self-motivated, that I couldn't just like go with whatever was coming up, that I had to prioritize spending time working on something that had nothing to do with the work that's in my inbox, because we're working for the future. Even murals, like I said, murals is my main thing, but it's like, I'm like, dude, murals look different when you're 55, you know what I mean, or something like that. I'm like, you're climbing scaffolding when you're 55 is different than when you're 25. And so I'm like, even in the back of my mind, as I'm doing murals, I'm like, okay, well, figure sculpture is like really interesting to me. Really, that's like my next fascination. And so like I'm starting to learn figure sculpture and this and that, because it's like I got to have an exit strategy. And I think because I knew so many things were stacked against me, I knew like this could still fail. Like it still could fail. Sure. Like you could find me 3 years from now and I'm working at McDonald's because it didn't work out. But it's like, because I knew there were things stacked against it, I knew I had to be
a better fallback plan than McDonald's.
I knew I had to way to a trip and be like, oh, Dan's the pilot. Look at that.
Hey, Dan, it's good to see you. Yeah, supersize me. I'll take the supersize man. That can be a noble profession. I'm not knocking anybody that works at McDonald's.
I don't think anybody who listens to us is going to be mad at you.
Okay.
So I think a lot about art. You know, I mean, I'm a graphic designer, and I used to be really involved in filmmaking, and I'm a musician, and of course when we were building out the chapter house, like paintings are really easy to find. You know, and then it's really a matter of taste. You know, do I like this, and does it fit the house, and does it go? Sculpture is impossible to find. Carvings are impossible to find. I mean, unless you're ready to drop $10K or more, right? Finding a sculpture that's not some cheap knockoff of a Archangel Michael thing from a Catholic bookshop is impossible. And there's a whole huge range of expression that's not yet been mined in sculpting. Right. Like you don't see any fantasy art, you don't see any abstract art in sculpture, you're not going to see any, I mean, all you're going to see is classical Greek figures, and maybe that's all there's a market for. So, but I think things, tangible, holdable, touchable, flickable things are the next great foray in a digital world, because because everybody's got a phone, and you know, at the end of the day, you're going to show somebody something cool on your phone. But I'll tell you, when people come to the chapter house, they don't look at their phones.
Right.
They come like, what is this thing? And they hold it in their hand and they pass it around, and then they, you know, put it in their bag.
Right.
So I applaud your move into other art forms, just because I think nobody's doing that.
Right.
You know, we don't have any amateur sculptures. I can't find wood carvers. But you can find, anybody's got Photoshop, you know, an old pirated version or something they got at a flea market or something their dad bought for them. Everybody has got access to oil and canvas, but the people that are out there with a Dremel trying to turn a tree stump into a goblin, I mean, there's not a lot of those kids.
Right.
So that's new. That's cool.
Well, and I think for me specifically, because I didn't get an art degree in school, there's a lot of I think maybe art degrees help prepare you for the gallery world. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Sure.
But I think as far as like actually doing the art, maybe they're helpful, maybe they're not. I think a lot of stuff you can learn from an apprenticeship or a YouTube video or a 3-day workshop or like. But I do think you learn more about just like high art culture, art criticism, art history. You know, you get way more context and so I don't ever super feel comfortable in the gallery world. I feel like, especially the blue collar work that I do, makes me like, that's not my thing. And I think I know a ton of sculptors that are doing wood carving, that are doing this and that. Yeah. But they're excited about this gallery world thing, and it's like and so that's where they're headed. So you can find their work's being purchased by art collectors that think that it'll be more valuable later as they develop, but it's like all their stuff's going to be in galleries. And I think just for me, I've decided that doesn't feel like a natural fit for me. So I'm like, okay, that's a road going this way. I think I see a dirt path here. I'm going to just take it. It might dead end, but I'm going to take it as far as this feels more natural. And so like even with murals, I feel like, I see it way more as like a service industry. Like I'm helping your vision come to life. Yeah. And then if there's any room left, I'm obviously gonna have to sprinkle me in it because that's what I got. And
between the koi and the bottle rocket,
there's
a lot of room for Dan.
Right. And I think it's fulfilling to me, man, to help, because I think a lot of people don't have the tactile skills to create art. Yeah. But they have an artistic mind and they think in images and I think that needs to be cultivated in human beings. Like it's fulfilling to me to help cultivate that, to help encourage somebody. Because people always be like, well, I'm not an artist. You know what I mean? Yeah. And usually what they mean is I'm not a painter. Like if you talk with them long enough, you'll find something they do that has a lot of creativity and a lot of art in it. Yeah. You know, and you're like, oh no, actually you are an artist, but it's like, but they're always like just nervous or can be like nervous about. And I feel like art is like, not as much like eating, but it's like something that we all have a little bit for our own good and even if it's not your job. And so
I tend to stay away from when because of those exact issues, I tend to stay away from the words creativity or art. Instead, I like to talk about aesthetics or design, taste. Yeah. You know, even using the words like, oh, I like to find things that are cool and put them together. You know, saying those kind of things will elicit from everybody, oh, yeah, I like to do that.
Or instinct. These like, you got to change the rhetoric because people will be like, oh, no, I'm not an artist. Yeah. Yeah,
which is a quick end to a conversation, you know. Right. And if what you're trying to do is build rapport, what you're trying to do is get people out of their shell, you're right. As soon as you say art, they go, oh, I can't paint, or you know, I don't know how to draw. You know, and you're like, that's me neither. You know? Most of the artists I know don't know how to draw. Right. You know, yeah. And what about faith? I mean, we've talked, of course, a lot over the last few days about faith, and it's been great having you at the chapter house, man. And so it's fun to get to know you. Yeah. But do you see in the scripture any artists, like is there anybody to whom you're drawn as sort of a patron biblical character?
Dude, so I'm like you're catching me today in the middle of like a weird journey with art and faith specifically, but I think maybe over the last couple of years, what's been impressed on me is the artistry of Christ. And I think all the reasons that people can criticize art as like a communication form or as like a, how do I say this? I want to try to say this well. Art can be misunderstood. We talked about this. It's dangerous. It can be misunderstood. As soon as you move into the abstract, people can take it all kinds of different ways. And sometimes maybe that's what you want, but sometimes if you're trying to communicate a clear message, if the priority is to communicate a clear message, then art, I think what the idea that I've heard, that I kind of bought into, that I'm kind of buying out of, is like art is too dangerous. People can miss it. It cannot work out. But I think what's been impressed on me is like, as human beings, we're really small. We're really small life forms. Like, and obviously we believe we have value, but it's like there are certain like concepts of truth that we won't understand. We don't have literal words to understand those things. And so art and moving into the arena of abstraction, though it's not maybe a complete picture, it's actually going to get us closer to understanding that truth than trying to put it into words. And like in Christianity, there's all kinds of things like we'll be like
free will and determinism. You know, what's the right formula for figuring that out? Everybody's going to pick a side and fight about it. You know, and we're all going to stand before the Lord one day, and He's going to go, "You were so wrong, and you had part of it right, but so wrong, all of you."
Right.
You know? And you go, art is a way better way to express that, to feel that, to navigate it. Yeah.
Totally right. Yeah, and I think we'll be like, you know, yeah, and I think so. I feel like I feel affirmation in just that, like art has a place in the exploration of truth.
Yeah,
and in the areas that they're not abstract necessarily. They're just abstract to us because we're so small. Sure. Like those are like the deep space parts of truth that are like hard for us. We don't have technology to get there yet, you know, or whatever. And so it's like. If that makes sense at all. And then, dude, just Christ took the risk of artistic expression all the time, dude, all the time. And it's like it confused some people, and some people got it and some people didn't. And sometimes like the disciples didn't get it until like years later. They're like, oh, that's what he meant. You know,
that's
like,
what he meant with the sower.
Foot washing is like, this is like an expressive art form to communicate something. I don't think they get it while it's happening. They don't get it. You know, like communion, Jesus, like as far as I know, not a lot of Jewish leaders taught on like the value of cannibalism. You know what I mean? Like it probably wasn't like, and so Jesus like coins all of his teachings off of this like pivotal cannibalistic element of like, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. And you're like, dude, and I think sometimes with art, it's like, well, that's so edgy. That's like, if you would make it less edgy, I think it wouldn't like shock people, and they would listen to your message more, and maybe that's true. Like, but dude, Jesus, right or wrong, what you think about Jesus, he didn't seem to be worried about that at times. Like he was constantly making conversations harder than they had to be. Somebody came, great insight. Somebody came to him and said, "Hey, talk to me about the kingdom of heaven." And Jesus is like, you have to.
Hate your mother and father,
or you have to be born again. Unfortunately, all these words have been normalized, so we're like, "Are you born again, brother?" But it's like, that's weird, dude. That's weird. You're talking about like the birthing process. You're talking about, not to be overly gross, just this is what he's talking about. You're talking about blood. You're talking about poop. You're talking about babies. You're talking about biological connections being cut.
You're like talking about, am I supposed to go back in my mother's womb? You know, and that's the first time that phrase has ever been used. And the first person he says it to doesn't get it, and then he blasts them. You fool! Your understanding is. And you're like, really? You made a innovation in theology, and I didn't get it in the first 1 second.
Right. Dude, this is, I think, an important thing that's still new for me that I'm trying to figure out. But it's like, dude, art requires that we create. Art appreciation requires that we create. Like C.S. Lewis. Everybody likes C.S. Lewis. He said that he thinks books should only be able to be critiqued by good readers, by people that have done the work of becoming a good reader. Those are the people that get to make comments about the book.
That's funny.
And it's like, he describes a good reader as like someone that will suspend criticism until the story's over. Like, let the story happen to you. Like, let it process, like somebody that's not going to nitpick details in chapter 2. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff. So he talks about like, to learn to appreciate literature, you have to become a good reader. Like, let it happen to you, and then evaluate how successful it was. And I think, unfortunately, because of like the dangers of art and stuff, I think especially in religious circles, we're nervous about stretching in the way we think about things. And Jesus was constantly stretching the way people thought about things face to face with him. Yeah. This Jewish leader comes to him in secrecy. He's risking his job. He's kind of doing the brave thing. And Jesus cuts into this conversation about being born again. And he's like, that doesn't make sense. And then Jesus is like, okay, I'm not talking about physically finding your mother and climbing back inside of her. He's like, what's going?
Are you stupid?
He's like, I need you to stretch with me. I need you to stretch with me because I'm trying to talk to you about a spiritual truth. Yeah. And I'm trying to use physical imagery so that you understand it. But we're not talking about physical right now. We're talking about a spiritual truth. And it's like, I think it's interesting that like whenever Jesus was trying to stretch someone from these physical elements into some sort of like spiritual understanding, he used art. He decided that art, that imagery, that parables, that
writing in the dirt, performance art, cursing the fig tree, like you said.
He decided that's the best way.
Going off in the desert for 40 days by yourself. I mean, that's a stunt. I mean, that's a spiritual discipline. I go, but everybody knew he was gone. No, when's the last time somebody disappeared for 40 days?
Right.
Like that wasn't common practice.
Right.
Which one of your pastors at any of our churches, if they just disappeared for 40 days, wouldn't cause a massive stir?
Totally.
I'm going to turn water into wine. I'm going to have the first of the party parables. I'm going to rebuke my mom, and then I'm going to vanish.
Right.
Like, I mean, if you go to a wedding reception for 7 days and drink 8 gallons of wine, and then you disappear for a month, I think you're dead in the
People
ditch.
are worried about you.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. And then you come back and they're like, I was talking to Satan the whole time. That guy's a dick.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot to absorb,
And dude, I think for Christians, what is the value? And obviously I'm biased because I'm like trying to figure out how to function in the world of art, but what is the value of Christians learning art appreciation? Learning to be good readers, learning to be good art observers. What's the value of that? Does that have any practical value for my Christianity? I don't know. I feel like it would have helped you if Jesus was around because he was constantly doing those things. And so it's like, and people that couldn't stretch into these art forms. And dude, he said those, and I don't know, I'm not a theologian, but he would be like, those who have ears to hear, let me hear. And it's like, when I read that, I see like those who are ready for this. Like some of you guys aren't ready for this. Some of you guys are. I'm gonna do it so those who are ready can like hear it.
That's a good apple. But I hate the phrase art appreciation because it makes me think of all the times when I had to take museum tours or all the time I had to listen to music that somebody in a bow tie told me was important.
Right. Yeah. Like, there's probably needs to be a new phrase for that.
Yeah. I don't want to choke on haute couture. I want to learn how to see and how to perceive and how to enjoy. I want to learn to see the universe in a blade of grass. I want to learn how to walk downtown and see a mural and not go, oh, I can't believe they're ruining downtown. That's what's ruining downtown? Detroit is wrecked by graffiti? No, come on. So I want to find beauty. I want to appreciate life, and I want to never be offended. I mean, that's art is offensive. I always think of the relationship between art and faith as like a husband and wife.
Right.
Because everybody I know with the name Faith, with maybe one or two exceptions, if your name is Faith and you're listening, is prim and like claustrophobically holy, like really uptight. So I imagine Faith is the wife, and she's got the top button done up on her blouse, and she's dressed very conservatively and no makeup, and she has short hair and it's pulled down with barrettes, and she has perfect little manners, and she hardly moves, and she's very nervous and anxiety ridden, and everything has to go just perfectly.
Right.
And then her husband Art has got his belly hanging out over his guts, and he's burping, and he's eating too much, and he's laughing too loud, and he's drinking too much at the table, and he's making outlandish comments, and they're at this dinner party, and the whole time the wife is Faith is terrified about what the people think about Art. And Art is so impatient with Faith because she's not real. Right. And I just think like that's
they're critical of each other.
Yeah, that's been my experience where you go like, if maybe Faith loosened up a bit, and you're like, why did you marry Art in the first place? Like that was your choice.
Right.
Yeah, but you guys have been together since the beginning. So why haven't you made your peace with it? And if Art would just stop, stop disdaining Faith.
Right.
If art could love faith, and it doesn't mean that he has to totally change who he is, but if art could at least realize that faith is his companion, not his beekeeper,
right.
They would just have a better life. And
right.
I just keep thinking, man, that's everything. If we're going to bring art and faith together in the church, there's lots of marriage counseling that needs to happen. But before we ever get there, I want to make sure that art and faith live harmoniously in me. I want to make sure that the marriage of art and faith is, fecund, beautiful,
right.
personal, open, because like you said, I mean, Jesus was like that. Paul was like that. I read all the prophets as performance artists.
Yeah.
I mean, they did these wild and weird things that make no sense to us in a contemporary setting, except in the world of art. And I go, like, Lady Gaga could have been Ezekiel. He is totally somebody who would have walked around in a meat suit. There's no way that David Byrne or David Bowie was any more strange than Jeremiah. I mean, right. We have artists that are provocateurs now in the same way that the Old Testament prophets were provocateurs then, and just maybe who they're prophesying about is a little different.
Right. Well, didn't I always think about like we can. Well, I don't think that's as helpful. Even in I'll say this just quickly. Even in our situation, if I go into a culture that has nothing like something I'm trying to describe, okay. Let's say I'm like out in the woods somewhere. There's no technology. They don't have anything, and I'm trying to tell them about this new type of technology that they have. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, so like what it does is, and I'm like grabbing rocks, and I'm grabbing, and I'm like, this turns into that, and this turns into that. And if the people can't go with me a little bit, instead of being like, well, a rock doesn't do that. So like you're lying because a rock doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Like you're like right. And it feels like that's what like Jesus is constantly dealing with is he's like trying to find the things we have down here to talk about the things that we're not aware of. Yeah. And we're like, I can't climb back inside my mom. Like we're like, and he's like, go with me on it. So it's like
deliberately obtuse.
So I genuinely think, dude, I think art appreciation, we got to figure out until we have a better word. I'm going to say art appreciation. Yeah. I think it's a misconception that it means you have to like all art. It doesn't mean, I think it's like, I hate eating crawfish, and it's like people do these crawfish boils down where I'm at. I don't get it. Yeah. But dude, if you talk to somebody that eats crawfish and you say you don't like eating crawfish, what they want to do is walk you through the process. Like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And they're like, here's what you got to do. And you like come in, you like squeeze this right here, and then you're going to want to pull this just like this, and then you do it just like this, and then the really freaky ones will like suck out the guts. Oh, you got to suck out the guts. And I'm like, but what's weird is like they're trying to teach me crawfish appreciation. Yeah. Like if you're not doing it right, you don't stand a chance at liking it. If I walked in and picked up a crawfish and I'm in a hurry, oh, he wants me to try crawfish. I'm in a hurry. Okay, I'll try crawfish. I pick it up and just stick the whole thing in my mouth and start crunching. And it's got like eyes and arms and legs and all these parts that are meant to be discarded, that are just a vehicle to get the meat to me, like all these things. And I just start eating the whole thing, and I'm like, oh, crawfish sucks. Then it's like, I'm allowed to still not like crawfish. I went through the process. I took the crawfish appreciation course. I tried everything about it. At the end of it, I thought, it's not my thing. Yeah. But I feel like it's important when you're evaluating anything to go through the process, to learn to at least try to appreciate it. And I think with art appreciation, you're totally allowed to not like art. Like that's what's great about art is sometimes it impacts you and you don't like it, and it's still doing a good work in you because now you're exploring, why don't I like it? And so I don't think you have to like art for it to be able to impact you in a positive way. But I think it's not going to impact you in a positive way if you haven't figured out the process of digesting it, like a healthy process of digesting it. And so one example is, I forget the guy's name. I'm actually real illiterate with contemporary art cultures. And this is kind of controversial and makes people angry. I'm not trying to make people angry, but he did an art piece called like Piss Jesus, where he saved up a bunch of his urine in a jar and then put a crucifix in the urine and has just like Jesus floating in a giant jar of his urine, and called the art piece Piss Jesus. And obviously, dude, that made a ton of people angry and like this and that, and reasonably so, dude, because you're taking something that's important to people. He probably is trying to piss people off. I don't know what his motives were. You're taking something that's important to people and you're like defacing it, and that always makes people angry. But dude, what's weird is like I started just trying to be like, okay, let me walk through the process on this and just start thinking about it. And like I don't know what his intentions are. His intentions might have been virtuous. I don't know. But it's like it's art. It's here. Let me just walk through the process on it. And dude, I started like praying about it and thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, dude, this offends us because the crucifixion doesn't offend us anymore. Like a skinny half dead man hanging on some sticks is not offensive to us anymore. But it's like, dude, if you like believe the Bible and you look at that, it's like, dude, what the Father did to the Son or allowed to happen to the Son is so much more offensive than this. Yeah, right. Like human beings are like spitting in his face, attacking. He's naked, like before people. It's it's like physical pain, social pain, rejection. Like all these people that he's been investing day and night and day, they split on him. They're gone. Like abandonment, like all these things. And it's like, as much as it feels like this piss Jesus art piece is disrespectful, what I like landed on is I was like, no, yeah, the cross is like, but then it's like, I think the Bible's trying to say God subjected himself to that. Like Jesus climbed down into the jar of piss. Like the Father said, Jesus, get in the jar of piss. And then Jesus willfully climbed down into the jar of piss. Yeah. And not trying to be overly gross for the sake of being gross, but sometimes we need things to be reframed so that we can recapture the truth that was first captured by the people that saw it.
Yeah, that's hugely insightful, and you're right, and that idea does that, and oh man.
So I gained I gained this whole new appreciation of the love of God expressed. Yeah. The willingness of Christ to humble himself into gross place. It's like, dude, I'm sitting there processing this art piece and I'm like crying. There's like this spiritual edification that's happening just because I'm willing to like engage this piece. And I don't know. Yeah, dude, I think it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a sense in which like most Christian people I know, I'm thinking of a particular experience I'll share in a second, but most Christian people I know, especially evangelicals, like they don't want to be disrupted because, of course, who does? You know, especially like you come to church, you're there with your family, you're like, this is not a time for disruption. This is a time for encouragement. This is a time for affirmation. This is time for edification, time for adoration. It's not a time to get punched in the mouth. I mean, that's the mindset. But the problem is that we never choose for ourselves times to get shaken up. Like we never choose to reclaim the humiliation of the cross. We never choose to go back to what the first ugliness was of the crucifixion of Jesus or the persecution of the church. We sanitize everything. Like the Apostle Paul says, your righteousness is like dirty menstrual rags, and we go like, well, we don't need to say that. It's like
don't be gross. Don't make it gross.
Why do you got to do that? You know, Elijah and the prophets of Baal, he's up there saying like, maybe your God's impotent. Maybe his dick doesn't work. Maybe he's on the taking a dump, and we go like, well, you don't need to say that, because we're Sunday schooling everything. And as a dad, I get that. Like I don't want my kids to be exposed to R-rated stuff when they're 4 and 5.
Totally.
But as a pastor, I can certainly see that Christianity has become weaker, less substantial, that Christian people are way more invested in protecting the status quo than they are in faithfully following Jesus, that we're trying to turn Christian spirituality into some combination of Target and Panera Bread. And I like both of those places, but that's hardly the voracious, passionate frenzy of the biblical narrative and the early church, and certainly the life of Jesus. And so I go, somewhere we need to get disrupted, so we need to have a pattern interrupt, because Christian radio is gag worthy most of the time. I mean, like it's just, how do we make things more floral? That's the great ambition of the Christian machine.
Well, dude, and I think when artists get frustrated because they put so much energy into something and it's immediately misunderstood, it's immediately misjudged, the common pattern is like, forget you guys. You guys are idiots.
Yeah, right.
And so then what happens is just artists create art for other artists.
Yeah.
But then it becomes this, not trying to be overly gross, it becomes this like weird inbred culture where it's like none of us. It gets weird. We all need people unlike us to be contributing to the way that we think. And so it's like, but I get that. It's like one person is hurt by how aggressive the artist is being, so they reject the artist. The artist is hurt by the rejection and all this stuff. But it's like, dude, I do think artists if people listening are artists, there's like, if you really want to make things better, I think there is an element of like helping people to get help. Like totally, art's gonna punch you in the face. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it's like if somebody is learning to box, they learn how to get punched in a way where it's not gonna be detrimental. Maybe I don't know anything about boxing, but it's like I'm sure at some point part of your training is like when this guy, when you see that you're not gonna dodge and he's gonna hit you in the face, try to do this to make the blow sustainable, where it doesn't knock you over, and then you can come back. And I think what's weird is a lot of times artists put so much time and energy in learning how to punch with their art. And then they'll just walk up to a civilian and punch him in the face with it. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, check out this punch that I learned. Like, you know, and it's like people are like, and so I think it's like a two-way street where it's like, dude, if you really want to make that better as an artist, then humble yourself. Humble yourself. And like be willing to be criticized and try to help people learn to take a punch. Like try to help people learn to take a punch. So because I think they will take the punch from you once they know how to take it. And they'll be like, dude, that's a good punch. Okay, I got one back. And it becomes this spar that's like helpful.
Let me give you an example from my own ministry of something I wish I would have done it a little differently. Okay, so we're teaching through the book of Ecclesiastes. I love the book of Ecclesiastes. It speaks to me in new and different ways about every decade. So it's the Dave McDonald book in the Bible, okay? And so I'm teaching through it at Westwinds. I'm a senior pastor only for 3 or 4 years, I think, at the time. So I'm still learning how to be a senior pastor. And I've always been a provocateur, and I've always been rambunctious, and I've always been caustic, and I love that about myself. That's how God wired me. And most of my life, people have appreciated that about me, though not unilaterally. But again, new to the senior pastor gig. I'm talking to my editor at Nav Press, and he's also the editor for Eugene Peterson. He says, "Oh, you're teaching on Ecclesiastes." Eugene Peterson, the guy who did the message, he goes, he wanted to translate Ecclesiastes. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, like pissing into the wind. What is the actual, I'm trying to remember what the real thing in Ecclesiastes is, like blowing in the wind or like dust in the wind or something. Okay. And he goes, but in Hebrew, the idiom was offensive. Like the idea of, you know, like spitting into the wind or whatever. The idiom.
You get dirty.
And it's dirty, like unsanitary, humiliated, you know.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing you'd wish upon an enemy when somebody was being a goof or stupid. Or
right.
He goes, so Eugene Peterson says, I want to translate it as meaningless, like pissing in the wind. And but of course the editors wouldn't go for it. And I heard that and I went, I'll go for it. Like that's truthful, that's provocative, that's honest. So a friend of mine is an actor in LA, and I hire him to perform the book of Ecclesiastes. Sunday morning we get up there and we play an audio only clip in the dark by candlelight of him reading the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, like pissing in the wind, like pissing in the wind, like piss in the wind. And as it's going on, I'm on stage in the dark getting ready to preach, and I've got this great message on Ecclesiastes and futility and finding hope and meaninglessness and, how do we trust Jesus when our moorings are lost? And as a piss in the wind, I hear people in the audience going, what? No, you got to be kidding me. Then I hear people getting up and leaving, and people are mad. And I'm sitting there going, how do I get up now and preach? How do I say, hey, sorry about that, we misjudged? Do I address it? I just didn't have the experience or the wisdom to know what to do. And we had 3 more clips that we were going to play in the service where there was going to be more pissing in the wind, and then 3 more services that day. And so I'm like, I just don't know how to handle it. So we ended up, I just said to the tech guy, I'm like, hey, we're going to go ahead and skip those other clips. And then I preached my sermon. Found out who left later. Didn't use any more of the piss in the wind clips for the rest of the series. Found out who left. Called them that afternoon. Real conservative Christian folks who normally we don't have. The lady on the phone who's she goes, my kids were there and they've never heard that word before. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. She goes, you must be so stupid. I said, hey, hang on. And this is about to get R-rated here. If you're listening, I'm going to use some hockey talk. I go, hey, hang on. I said, this was an honest mistake. She goes, are you fucking retarded? And I was like, whoa.
Right.
Like, you're mad that your kids just heard piss, but you're like, whoa. So it just blew my mind. Well, then of course we have like an emergency elder meeting or whatever, and I'm under some serious scrutiny.
Right.
I'm getting thrown under the bus by other staff members who knew I was going to do it, and were like, "I wish you wouldn't have done that." That was, I'm like,
Right.
"Wait, a week ago you told me, yeah, go for it. You got such balls. This is true. Now you're tossing me under the bus." And then I had an elder say to me, he goes, it would have been nice to have a heads up. And at that point, the light kind of went on for me. And I go, I think if I'd got up there on Sunday morning and said, "Hey, everybody, here's the story. I was talking to my editor. Eugene Peterson. This is what he said."
Right.
Now, I realize that's an offensive term. I get it. So if you got little kids in the room, maybe this isn't the place
Totally.
for them. We're going to give this a PG-13 rating. Like if I had pastored them through that,
Right.
I think it could have been really meaningful. I just didn't have the wisdom or the understanding or the experience to know how to do that. So I reflect on that experience often, because I go, man, as a thinker, as a theologian, as somebody who wants to authenticate the biblical story, that was the right call. As a
Right.
pastor, that was the wrong way to do it.
Right.
and I've had lots of experiences like that, sadly, over the years. But I go, I feel like I walked up to somebody on the sidewalk and showed them my new
Punched him in the face. Check this out. Yeah. Dude, and sometimes your intentions aren't bad. And I think there's like wisdom. To me, it's like less of a moral thing, but and more of just a wisdom thing, because it's like we tend to interact with people based on where we're at and what's happening in our life.
Yeah.
And I feel like maturity, like the weaker brother, all the weaker brother stuff, like maturity and love would dictate that I'm totally going to interact with somebody based on where I am in my life and the processes I'm in and what. But like if I want to be smart about it and go the extra mile, I'll also try to interact with them based on where they are. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I think it's hard. I don't know how people do that with a congregation, because you got people that are all over the place. But it's like
thousands of people.
But it's like maybe if you, dude, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And everybody hates the weaker brother idea. Like, oh, I should be more careful because Bible says I should love the weaker brother. And it feels like this spiteful, like, oh, I'm the weaker brother. Like, but it's like, dude, we are all the weaker brother in some arena. And I think the idea is like, just get over yourself and think about where they're coming from. You know what I mean?
But you still, yes, I agree. But that's kind of a fashionable argument right now. And I think we always have to hold that in tension with the fact that Jesus didn't always concern himself with the weaker brother. I mean, Jesus was aggressive. Jesus called the disciples fools and idiots. They were clearly, everybody's weaker than Jesus. He's the ultimate spiritual apex predator, So, and then he's shaming the Pharisees. He's blasting the Sadducees. He's, calling out the political rulers of his day, admittedly infrequently, but still, I mean, Jesus would blast people. He'd shock people. He'd chastise them for not understanding where he was coming from. Now, I'm not Jesus. You're not Jesus.
Totally.
But he's our model. He's more than our model, but he's at least our model. And then you look at the Old Testament prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel, Isaiah. Of course, they were vicious. Paul, the writer of Hebrews, John the Revelator. I mean, so yes, weaker brother, and we should have that pastoral impulse. But I think if you're someone who has a prophetic temperament or a prophetic calling, then when the Barnabases in our lives tell us, consider the weaker brother, consider the weaker brother, consider the weaker brother, they're taking us away from the call of God upon our lives to speak prophetically or teleically, to call people to something different. So there's a dialectic, a tension between, how are we faithful to our calling to provoke in holy ways, the holy provocation, without sucker punching people all the time.
Well, and maybe go ahead.
If the phrase is consider the weaker brother, it's not take the actions that are best and easiest for the weaker brother.
Yeah, at all times.
Right. Yeah. So you just got it's just making sure you understand your entire audience
and love would dictate that you want that brother to be strong. And so like what's weird about Jesus, from what I can tell, this could be wrong, but he was like incredibly insightful into the person he was talking to at all times.
Yeah, right.
So even when he was challenging somebody, he knew they could handle that challenge. And it was like, and he still, the rich young ruler shows up and is like, man, I've done everything perfect. but go ahead and double check. Is there anything? And it says he saw him, and he like loved him.
Yeah.
And then he challenged him. He said something that was challenging. He didn't like necessarily pull the punch, but I think it's weird because Jesus would interact with two different people coming from the same situation differently.
Yeah.
And I think the difference was he could see each person.
Yeah.
And so totally like, I don't know, dude, Old Testament prophets, when you're talking to a crowd, I don't know how you facilitate that, but it's like, at least in like personal interactions, I do still think that the tension, the way that tension works out is totally like, do what you got to do as far as challenging people. But also there's a little bit of wisdom in making it about them and not about you.
Yeah,
that's
great.
If it's about them, then you're going to consider where they're at, and love is going to dictate that you challenge them maybe in a way that they can handle. I don't know. Maybe we don't have that discernment, so we can't do that. But it's like,
we can get it through the Holy Spirit. I mean, but that's great. You go like, am I satisfying my need to be a provocateur, or am I faithfully executing the call of God upon my life? Or am I just worried about how they'll hear me? Like those are three very different approaches to the same message. If I'm always considering the weaker brother, it feels a little bit like I got a rock on my shoe, because if I inadvertently hurt somebody, everyone goes, "No, stop! Don't why you gotta be like that?" You know, it's like faith at dinner with Art. You're just like, Art can't be himself ever. You know, Dave can't be himself ever. So you can't take that too far. But neither can I go, "Hey, I'm Dave McDonald and I'm a filibuster." Boom. You know, because that's not right either. So you walk in step with the Spirit. And I've noticed in myself, the older I get, people always ask me for church advice, and they want to know how to make my church cool or how to do the things or whatever, And of course, a lot of people who want that advice, like their churches are terrible, And it used to be, when I was younger, I'd go in and go, well, here's the first 500 things I would change, and they'd get overwhelmed, and then I realized over time, I go, oh, they can't do that. They can't. And so now they'll say, hey, come into my church, and there'll be somebody who's never going to quite get the culture, and they're going to be somebody who's never going to quite get vision, and they'll say, hey, what should I do? And now I'll just put my arm around them and say, man, you're doing exactly what God's calling you to do. Just enjoy the life that you have, because putting ridiculous pressure on them to, I don't know, get tattoos, like that's silly. And they're not in the inside, they're never gonna be like all the churches they idolize. Totally. So don't chase after that. Walk in step with the Spirit and be who God's called you to be, and do what the Lord's put in you to do. And for me, I feel like I'm much gentler with people who are never gonna quote unquote get it. Right. As if I do, as if anybody totally does. But I just go like this. I don't need to be the cool coach.
Well, and you guys do a lot of strength training stuff, so you probably would have more insight on this. But from what I know, if you have a good someone that's training you to make you stronger, there's gonna be times where they're gonna tell you to try to lift more weight than you want to try to lift. You know what I mean? But also they're not gonna say, well, the goal is that you lift X amount of pounds. So day one, X amount of pounds. Boom. We're just gonna try every day until you get it. You know what I mean? It's like
500-pound deadlift today. This
guy's an idiot. It's about him being tough. It's about him being the strength trainer guy. He's not considering you actually developing healthy at all. And so it's like, dude, I think, when you actually care about someone, you're going to know, I care about you so much that I need to I need to challenge you. Yeah. And you don't want me to challenge you, and I need to challenge you. But then there's so many, I don't know all the verses, I don't have them memorized, but there's so many times in scripture where it's like with love. With love, do this with love, and that love is constantly if you're not careful, you're gonna make everything about you. You're gonna make correcting someone else about you. You're gonna make loving someone else about you. You're gonna make advocating for someone else about you. You're gonna make social justice about you. You're gonna about proving you're not this or that. It's like and that with love is constantly challenging you to climb out of yourself and care about and think about somebody else. Make this about somebody else. And in that somehow be liberated from the bondage of you being the universe. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so I totally agree. I don't, but I think it's like that with love is like a vital element.
Yeah. Oh man, right on. Well, thanks, dude, for joining us today. That's awesome. What a great note to go out on. Yeah, love. Love is the vital element.
In summary, love.
Yeah. Just bring it all back home. Yeah. All right. Thanks for being with us, everybody, on the Chapter House podcast. And love to get you at the house now that the apocalypse is over and the world is opening up. We have events on site at the Chapter House every month. Every month we have online courses and cohorts. And love to get you around. Cheers.